NBC News poll since Harris became the Democratic nominee. Give us your biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Obviously, you mentioned the headline, that 5-point advantage for Harris over Trump, but put this in some context. The previous polls we had going back a year when it was Biden versus Trump in our polling, look at what the results were. Very consistently, Trump led, Trump led, Trump led, Trump led. And there was a tie 1 year ago in September 2023. Now, 2 months after Biden exits, as you say, our first poll with Harris as the Democratic candidate, and Harris leads. First time you see a Democratic lead here. First time you see that Democratic number this high. This is 3 points better. Harris is 49 than Biden's best over the past year, 46. So it just illustrates how significantly things shifted when Harris replaced Biden as the Democratic candidate. And this is an interesting finding from the poll, too. It's interesting. Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president in what remains an unpopular administration, but asking folks which candidate better represents change by a 47-38 margin. In our poll, they're saying Harris and not Trump, the former president.
So, Steve, what about the picture behind the numbers? What does that tell us?
Yeah, so take a look here. The gender gap, I think. One of the biggest stories here in this Harris lead in our poll, because look at this. Among men, Trump has a sizable lead. He's beating Harris by 12 points among men. Among women, Harris has a much more sizable advantage. Look at this. It's 21 points, 58-37 in Harris's favor among women. So you could see how that nets out in her favor, giving her that lead nationally. But also just take this in some perspective here. That would be a gender gap, 21 and 12, of 33 points. Now, we talked in 2020, in 2016, about seeing historically high gender gaps in those presidential elections. This would obliterate those gender gaps. This has been a staple. The gender gap has been since 1980 of American politics. But if we see anything like a 33-point gender gap in November, that's absolutely off the charts, even by modern standards. And the other key finding here demographically, I think, break this down by race, it's among black voters, 85-7 Harris over Trump. Now, historically, this is what you'd call sort of a normal finding. Democrats have typically won the black vote by margins that look like this in presidential elections. Why this is significant is it did not look like this when Joe Biden was the Democratic candidate. Joe Biden was lagging. He was often in like the 60s among black voters in polling. And there are still some polls out there that have Trump doing better than this with black voters. But I think you also saw a lot of polls that were Trump versus Biden, where Trump was in the mid-high teens among black voters, which it's a low number overall, but historically that would be very high for Republicans. So Democrats were very worried about the black vote and underperforming historically with Biden as their candidate. This poll, at least, that's not happening here.